Stand by. We are live.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. We are the Historic Districts Review Board, and today is September the 10th, 2024. And we are now called to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Madam Chair Rios. Here. Vice Chair Guida.
Here.
Member Benvenu.
Here.
Member Mather.
Here.
Member Marjano.
Excused.
Member Bescheid. Here. And Member Degnan. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I would like to welcome Member Degman. I don't know, this is the first time that you've been here. Well, I've been here. I missed the last meeting, yeah. And yes, I'd like to welcome you. And if you can, and if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in historic preservation.
Thank you, Chair. I am Mary Ellen Degnan. I am from Boston, so I kind of got stuck in being a preservationist. And I lived in Texas, of all wonderful places, for 40 years, and the Yankee got involved in preservation. So I served on the equivalent in Dallas of this board, and it was a very exciting time trying to convince Texas that preservation was important. And we did a lot of good work, and it's a great board. And so I've always been interested in, of course, drawn to Santa Fe for its historic value and nature. Been here 25 years. And I don't know how much more. I don't want to bore you and take up time. But anyway, thank you for welcoming me and allowing me to serve. I am looking forward to this very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Rita moves to approve.
Bescheid seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Marjano. Sorry. Member Benvenu.
Yes.
Member Mather.
Yes.
Vice Chair Guida.
Yes.
Member Bescheid. Yes. And Member Degnan. Madam Chair, it has passed.
Thank you. We do not have minutes on this agenda, but we do have 4 findings of fact and conclusions of law. They are all from June 11th, 2024. Any changes to any of these, members or staff? It appears not. Is there a motion to approve these?
Bescheid so moves.
Mather seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Mather.
Yes.
Member Benvenu. Vice Chair Guida.
Abstain.
Member Bescheid. Yes. And Member Degnan. Madam Chair, it has passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Matters from the public. Anyone in this room or on Zoom wishing to address the board this evening in reference to board matters? No one in this room? And anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios, Stephanie Benenato. Stephanie, you may unmute.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I drop down, would you please tell me, and I'll try to move my microphone or do something to make myself more audible. I just want to say that it was a little confusing for this meeting because there was an agenda, which may be the agenda for tonight. But last week there was an agenda that included only 2 old cases and then discussion of the obelisk. And I'm just wondering if we can get a firm date on when that discussion is actually going to come to the H board. would be one of my questions. And then I also just want to point out to Gary Mokino that unfortunately Sarah Novison has put her sign back out away from her building. I don't know why she keeps thinking she can do that, but she does. And so I'd like to be able to advertise off my site, my business site too. So I'm just asking that you look into this and maybe actually do something that's a little create a disincentive for continually removing it and then putting it back up. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Anyone else on Zoom?
No, Chair Rios.
And next we have staff communications. Do you have anything, staff?
Rios, I don't.
Thank you, Mr. Marquino. And we have nothing under old business, but we have, oh, yes, Heather.
Thank you, Chair Rios. So I would like to let you all know about the conference Built in the Past that we are putting together, just like Built in the Future, which was held earlier this year. The Built in the Past is an initiative by the Land Use Department to have good conversations with the community about what we do, how we do it, and how we can improve. So I have just secured the keynote speaker for the Built in the Past conference, and which will be held on November 1st. So please put that on your calendars in the morning from 8 to 12 at a location where probably the History Museum, but I haven't received a confirmation about that. Sarah Bronin was confirmed. She's our keynote speaker by unanimous consent by the United States Senate in December 2022. So to serve as the 12th chair of the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. She's a Mexican-American and the first person of color to hold that position. She spent her career as a professor at Yale, as well as a professor in the Rubacha Department of Real Estate, associate faculty member of the law school, and a member of the graduate faculty in the field of architecture at Cornell. And in addition, she has served as an advisor for the National Trust for Historic Preservation and the Sustainable Development Code. She's busy as well because she's establishing the National Zoning Atlas to allow municipalities to collaborate on zoning matters and provide a source of information from across jurisdictions. And she will be our speaker and will also help guide us. She's written several articles on historic preservation and affordable housing being one of the big policy directives through the American Planning Association Planning and Urban Design, Preservation and Urban Design Division. And the APA is currently updating its policy framework with reference to that. So we're looking forward to her joining us on November 1st. And more information will be forthcoming.
Well, thank you for that, Heather. She's got quite a resume and seems like it's very interesting. What was her name again?
Her name is Sarah Bronin. Chair.
Thank you. So as I said, we have nothing under old business, but we have 7 cases under new business. The first case is 2024, and that is Paul's case, 2024-008-779, located at 428 and 428A San Antonio Street. Are those applicants here? They are here. Paul, you have the floor.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thank you for being here this evening.
Paul is preparing, let me tell you. I need to let you know that Jennifer just reminded me, I forgot to tell you all. If for any reason you disagree with the decision this board renders this evening, you can appeal to the city council. And you have X number of days, which is 15, after the findings and conclusions have been adopted. So there you go, Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In case number 2024008779 HDRB 428 and 428A San Antonio Street, the single-family residence at 428 San Antonio is listed as significant and the garage 428A San Antonio as contributing, with the east facade designated as primary to the downtown and east side historic district. The main residential structure and the garage were constructed in the mid-1920s in the territorial revival design style as seen by the adobe block and wood frame construction materials, brick coping, wood frame double hung windows, and white picket fence. The applicant received approval in 2012 under case H-12-014B and H-12-015B to make a series of improvements to the property, but due to family complications, those improvements were not made. Those approvals expired in 2017, and now the applicant is back before the board requesting to reinstate those approvals and required conditions. Here we see on the main residence, the north elevation and the east elevation. The east elevation being facing the street on San Antonio. Here on this are the south elevation and the west elevation. Here is a good depiction of the property midway through the construction and development of the previously approved renovations. Here at the guest house, 428A San Antonio is the north elevation and the east elevation. Currently, they are in this state of repair, a rough coat, stucco, and plywood boards covering the windows and doorways. Here on the south elevation and the east elevation, of the garage and guest house. So here's the 1991 New Mexico HBI form of the main residence. And so the addition of that garage took place, as you can see on the bottom right, with the addition in 2012. And so as on our site visit, we discussed on the garage historic material to be removed, and that's something we need to consider this evening. So currently on the proposed site plan of what they're doing on the main residential house, they're looking at restuccoing the structure, and then on the garage, looking at putting a new TPO roof, 2 skylights, and 2 pergolas on the north and on the east of the addition to the garage and guest house. On the floor plan, they're looking at adding the pergolas, new doors, on the addition to the garage, new windows, and with the carriage doors, the historic carriage doors, they're looking at installing a new carriage door, but it would be firm. It would not be removed. So here is the existing and proposed north elevation on the main residence. Here we see on the north elevation on the northwest would be, currently it's covered in a wood frame protecting the inside, but they're looking at putting in divided light windows. Here we see the existing and proposed east elevation on the main residence, and they're looking at repairing the stucco, recoating the stucco. Here on the existing south and proposed south elevation of the main residence, they're looking at restuccoing the structure. And on the existing west and proposed west elevation, they're looking at restuccoing the structure. So on the main residence, generally, other than the 2 windows on the north facade, they're looking at just restuccoing the structure. So on the existing north guest house, the existing and proposed on the guest house, currently there is a wood frame protecting the interior of that structure. They're looking at putting in the portal, pergola, pardon me, and the doors. Here on the existing east and proposed east guest house elevations, here they're looking at putting on the pergola, a doorway, divided light doors, and the carriage doors that will be set in permanently. The existing south and proposed south guest house elevations, currently the windows are covered by wooden protection, and they're looking at putting in divided light windows. The existing west and proposed west guest house elevations, where they propose to put the pergola and re-stucco. The colors of the stucco will be cementitious Elray stucco buckskin, and the wood trim around all the doorways and windows will match the existing style and colored in white. Staff recommends approval of the proposed project and finds that the application complies with section 14-5.2D, general design standards for all historic districts, and 14-5.2E, downtown and east side design standards. Staff stands for questions. Thank you.
Paul, for your report, could you kindly state the current status of both the main house and the garage?
Madam Chair, the current status of the main house at 428 San Antonio is significant. And the at 428A San Antonio is contributing with the east facade as primary.
Thank you. And the existing garage is being made a part of the casita, correct?
Madam Chair, the main garage has had that new addition built around 2012, and they just never completed it. And so it's in this stage where they just need to get it.
But the garage is part of the casitas, the garage and the casita are one.
Madam Chair, that is correct. Yes, ma'am.
Any other clarification questions, board members? It appears not. Oh, yes, Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick one. So it does appear that the garage doors might be historic, correct? Or maybe even probably are historic.
Madam Chair, Member Bienvenue, that is correct. They are historic.
So don't we need an exception for removal of historic materials if their plan is to replace them?
Madam Chair, Bienvenue, that is correct. And there would also need to be an exception to 50% rule to the historic.
Right, but I don't think that the removal of historic material was addressed either by the applicant or staff. So then can we address it tonight, even though it's not in the staff report?
Madam Chair, Member Bienvenue, I would request input from Gary Mokino, our direct manager.
Madam Chair, Member Bienvenue, yes, you can request the exception if you want to.
And what would staff's point of view be on the exception criteria, whether they're met or not for the replacement of the garage door?
Madam Chair, Member Bienvenue, staff would need to take a further look into the application before we could give better guidance for the applicant and to the board.
Okay, so for us to approve that, it would be your position that we should defer to a future meeting just on the issue of the garage door?
Madam Chair, Member Bienvenue, it would be best if we looked into it further before we made a clear distinction of removal of historic material. I would like the applicant and the homeowner to share their insight, but if they are looking at removing, we would need further look into it. Thank you.
Yes, Heather.
Thank you, Chair Rios. Member Bienvenue. As you know, exceptions need to be noticed. So There are two approaches that the Historic Districts Review Board can take. In this particular case, the building that you're discussing for an exception is separate from the main residence, and so there's two scopes of work. So the board, if it chooses, could approve the work if it finds sufficient the work on the main residence separate from the garage, and the garage can be considered at another time.
Okay, and it seems to me that it's really only the garage doors that is the only thing that hasn't been noticed, right? Everything else has been.
Chair Rios, member of Bienvenue, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, I was going to say everything else could be addressed with the exception, no pun intended, with the exception of the garage door. So, Member Guida?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a little bit more clarity from staff on the exceptions issue. There were a number of exceptions that were approved in 2012, right? And those are like, distance from a primary facade, 50% of the square footage of the garage, all of that stuff. That's water under the bridge. Where if we rule tonight to approve or to kind of revive the old approval, that we'd be just acknowledging that those criteria had been met in the past, and this board has already ruled onto it. This new exception that John has brought up is based on the idea that the existing garage door is historic material. Do we have verification of that? Or do we just think it's historic?
Chair Rios, Vice Chair Guida, from the historic photos that we reviewed in the HBI and the HCPI, those historic carriage doors are historic.
And were they included in the status designation and the primary facade designation when the garage was statused?
They did not. They just, they stated a blanket statement for the east facade as primary.
Okay. So some gray area. It wasn't specifically in the motion then at that time. And were the replacement doors approved in 2012?
Chair Rios, Vice Chair Guida, the carriage doors were previously approved with the condition that staff reviews what their design is.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Heather.
Chair Rios, Vice Chair Guida, the 2012 approval is certainly good guidance to this board, but this is a de novo hearing in that approval has since expired. Approvals are only good for 3 years, renewable for 2, and that timeframe has since expired. So just for the purposes of considering this case, that is an issue that is new regardless of whether it was approved then. Does that make sense?
I understand that, but that leaves the question, are we reopening the issue of exceptions, all the exceptions on this project? And I get the sense from the staff report that we're not. It's just, if there is an issue around the garage doors, if an exception is needed there. So would a motion tonight have to address the exception criteria that were met in 2012? And I don't mean to complicate this for the applicant. I really don't, because it's a little silly.
Madam Chair and Member Guida, I do think that if this is correct, that as of 2015, this application then lapsed, and this is a hearing de novo. I was not aware of that rule, but it might be part of the administrative structure of the land use department. I think it has to be noticed. I think there needs to be some notice that there would be an exception for removal of historic material.
But there would also, by that logic, have to be a notice of exceptions for the rest of these items.
Well,
if it's a de novo hearing.
I don't know if all of those require exceptions, but there would have to be, I believe, a description on the agenda of what is to take place.
Question to Member Guida. We're talking about the garage doors, and are you also talking about the 50%, or what else are you referring to?
Well, I'm alluding to the problem of, that there were exceptions that were approved in this case in 2012. And if we are viewing this as a de novo hearing,
Which it is.
then those also have not been noticed. This does not say that this is a case that requires exceptions for the garage door or for 50% of the footprint, additions to a primary facade, so on. So this is an argument in favor, just in terms of staff's consistency on the application and what we're doing, just a question of process.
So anyway, yes, Heather.
I'm sorry, Chair Rios.
Oh, no problem.
Member Guida. The work was initiated at that time. So there may be some vesting based on the scope of work that was initiated. I have to admit my ignorance on how much work was done, but there may be a vesting through that route. And that might be able to apply to the existing house and some of the garage material, if there was work done on the garage as well.
Yes, Member Benigno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just for clarification, I actually was mistaken. I thought this was coming before us for requests for exceptions, and I was just bringing up the garage door as perhaps one additional one. But now, as Member Guida pointed out, I see that we're really sort of trying to grandfather in all the previous exceptions that were granted as far as the way this is being presented. So it does seem to me that the garage door would be just as much grandfathered in as any of the others. So I see it as an A or a B. It's either we need to notice exceptions for the whole project, or we have the ability to approve it based on previous exceptions having been granted. I'm not sure what the answer is. Seems legal, but I see it different than the way I thought it was being presented.
When I hear de novo hearing, I think it means de novo means you start all over again. It means all new. So if there are exceptions to be sought, I think the fact that they were granted previously, but that the application and the permit lapsed and we're basically starting all over again. I think there needs to be an agenda item that specifically reads those exceptions are being sought on this significant structure. But I can just ask my staff question here.
You have something further, Attorney Rubali?
Madam Chair, I need to clarify something with the staff. Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll
Mhm.
return
Okay.
in just a moment. If we could just take a brief recess here. So, Madam Chair, I'm looking at that section of the code.
Sometimes things get complicated, but we will get through this.
And Madam Chair, apparently there's a provision for vesting, meaning if a substantial part of the project has already been constructed, apparently they have a vested right to proceed with the project as it is, but I have never seen that rule, and we're looking at that right now.
So Paul, you just showed us a picture of the door that was originally there. Is that the original door?
Chair Rios, members of the board, yes, ma'am, that would be the
And
original.
would you describe that to us and tell us what that door looks like and what is being proposed?
The garage door appears to be wood paneling with divided light windows or single panel windows, pardon me. Single panel windows, most likely built in the mid 1920s when the original structure possibly removed in the 70s, 80s. It's unknown when they were removed, but that would have been the original.
So you would say that the applicant is trying to replicate what was there originally, correct?
Chair Rios, I would say yes, they are.
Thank you. Member Bichard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just reading from the packet, the summary of the July 10, 2012 case. Looks like that case was approved with the condition that included that the work area of the addition be set back 6 feet from the primary facade. The fenestration on the primary facade will be the same as the doors observed in the historic photographs. And the door design and exterior lights be approved by staff before construction permit application is submitted. So it seems like this is all part of the previous cases. I'm not sure if the staff approval was obtained before this work started.
Chair Rios, member Beescheid. I would imagine so in 2012, given that they were permitted to do the work. And so in order to get the permit, they would have had to come to staff for that. So they must have gotten the permit. They must have come to staff, got approval, pulled permit, started construction, and they just never fruitioned, completed.
Thank you, Paul. Member Guido?
So I agree with Member Benville. This is either one or the other, that, you know, either this is a de novo hearing or this is a hearing in which we're saying that vesting matters and that the homeowner and the applicant proceeded after 2012 approvals in good faith. And that all that's being asked for tonight is a renewal of that approval. If there is such a provision, I would strongly favor, you know, being able to reactivate a vested approval because the project was started. In either scenario, whether it's a de novo hearing where we have to hear all exceptions again, or if it's vesting, I think, you know, because the garage doors are such a gray area, that, you know, I don't see anything in the packet that indicates beyond a shadow of a doubt that the the doors that are on the garage right now are historic material. I don't see that in the nomination and the designation. So I'm not willing to support an exception being required for the garage doors. I think this matter was likely addressed in the 2012 cases. And just to kind of recap, I would say that, if then no exception is required on the doors in any case, my preference would be to approve a renewal of the previous approval.
Chair Rios, Vice Chair Guida, staff agrees with that determination. We reviewed this case, we reviewed it with the applicant, made site visits, and just reinstating what was previously approved, given that they've accomplished 80% of that work, and just to get this moving forward for the new homeowners.
Well, I think that we need to move on, and I would like to hear from the applicant.
Madam Chair and Vice Chair Guida, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but from what I'm reading in the code, and I'm looking at section 14-3.19, it appears to me that either this is a de novo hearing, which would have to be renoticed and resubmitted, or there has been substantial progress on a permit, which has since expired. And if there has been substantial progress, my understanding is that that permit can be extended by the land use department, and in which case this hearing isn't even necessary. So I would like, I propose, Madam Chair, that we, that in light of the fact that the hearing may not be necessary, that I have the opportunity to review these provisions and also review the paperwork with respect to the original application submitted in 2012, so I can see what this project looked like originally. Of course, 2012 was, 9 years before I started here. And we can make a legal determination in-house as to whether or not there has been substantial progress, which would permit land use to go ahead and administratively approve the completion of this project without this hearing. That is what I propose at this time, with apologies for the delay that this will cause.
Heather, are you agreeing with what Attorney Rubelit has just indicated?
Yes, Chair Rios, I do agree. There are specific portions of the code outside of the Historic Districts Ordinance related to approvals, expiration of approvals, and what is not specifically related to asbesting in the, ordinance itself. But if there's substantive development progress, and it's my understanding that there has been in this particular case, then those exceptions from that time will be vested. And then all the rest of the new work that is being proposed relative to stucco and the installation of a skylight, that is all can be approved administratively. And so it is not necessary, and my apologies to the applicant or the board to review this case.
So do we just stop here, or do we make a motion or of any sort?
I would.
This has never happened that I recall.
This is new to me too, but I would make a motion that this be postponed for review by the land use department and the city attorney's office to determine whether the project can be administratively approved due to substantial vesting and substantial progress.
You heard the city, you heard Attorney Rubelit. Member Benvenu, please make a
Happy to make
motion.
that motion.
Okay.
Case 2024-008779 HDRB 428 and 428A San Antonio Street. I move that the matter be postponed for review by the city attorney as to whether this matter may be administratively approved. And if the determination is in the negative, that it be rescheduled for the soonest possible hearing with whatever exception requests are necessary and properly known.
Mather seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Benvenu.
Yes.
Vice Chair Guida,
Yes.
Member Bescheid, Member Dignan.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion has passed.
Thank you very much. Question for staff. How soon will this take place?
Chair Rios, the determination will be complete by next week. This time next week. And for us to research it.
Thank you. Applicants, sorry about yes.
There's a legal determination that I just have to make from reviewing sections of the code that I'm not particularly familiar with. And then I would also have to look at the original application, which Ms. Lamboy tells me she can find. And then we may have some questions for you, and we'll give you a call, especially if we find that, we need to recommend to be placed on an agenda again. We'll seek your input. Okay. Okay. All right.
Okay. Thank you all, and sorry for the events that occurred this evening. Next case is Lanny's case, and is the applicant for 807 Gildersleeve here. He's way back. Okay, Lanny, may we hear from you?
Good evening. This is case 2024-8935 for 807 Gildersleeve for a remodel of an accessory structure. The property is located on the east side of the road, just south of East Burger Street. The single-family residence and its associated accessory structure are listed as non-contributing to the Don Gaspar Area Historic District. The 450 square foot accessory structure is a wood frame, one-car garage with a partitioned storage area holding 3 storage rooms. The garage was built around 1942. Fenestration is only found on the west and north elevations. The west elevation, the former garage door opening is filled with boards with a section cut for a pedestrian door. There is no indication when the garage door was altered. The photos from Google Maps show the door in the same configuration as early as 2007. The central storage room is entered through a wood panel door on the west elevation, and adjacent is a 6-light non-operable wood sash window. The north elevation holds 2 identical 3-panel wood doors and a 1960s 180 square foot wraparound porch shelters the building on the west and the north. The applicant is proposing to convert the garage structure to a casita by raising the parapet by 5 inches from a height of 8 feet 7 inches to a total height of 9 feet and install roof insulation. Replace the 2 doors on the north elevation with wood TDL aluminum clad white windows and infilling the wall. Converting the exposed plywood siding on the west elevation to a stuccoed wall with 2 wood TDL aluminum clad white windows and install a compressor on the north elevation behind a 42-inch high coyote fence with varying tops. Re-roofing the portal to match the existing granular cap sheet tan color and staining the portal woodwork in a medium brown and stucking the casita in El Rey cementitious buckskin stucco. Staff recommends approval of the proposed project and finds that the application complies with section 14-5.2D, general design standards for all historic districts, and 5.2H, Don Gaspar area design standards. Stand for questions.
Thank you, Lanny. Any questions for Lanny at this time, board members? It appears not. May we hear from the applicant?
Raise your right hand and state your name and address for the record.
Christopher Purvis, 518 Old Santa Fe Trail.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do this under the penalty of perjury? Thank you.
Hey, Chris. So do you have anything to add to what Lanny just told us?
No, I think she did a really good job.
Okay. Members of the board, do you have any questions for Mr. Purvis? No questions? Anyone in this audience wishing to comment on this particular case? No one. Anyone on Zoom?
Chair Rios, no.
Thank you. It's a very straightforward project, and as usual, you do very nice work. Thank you, Chris. I will entertain a motion.
Each I will make a motion. In case number 2024-008935 HDRB at 807 Gildersleeve Street, I move that we approve the project as submitted and recommended by staff.
Wait a second.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Degnan,
Yes.
Member Bescheid,
Yes.
Vice Chair Guida,
Yes.
Member Benvenu, Member Mather.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion has passed.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Chris. And thanks, Lanny. And the next case is also Lanny's, and is the applicant for 107 East Palace here. Oh, it's Chris again. Okay. Lanny?
Okay, this is case 2024-8936 for 107 East Palace Avenue, units A1, A2, and A3. The structure is located behind 109 East Palace and shares a common wall with the Burrito Company and is located down a private drive with limited access. The multifamily residential structure is contributing to the downtown and east side historic district with the south elevation designated as primary. Because the structure is tucked behind the buildings lining Palace Avenue, the south elevation is only partially visible from Palace Avenue. According to the HCPI, the structure was originally constructed for stables circa 1883. The Spanish Pueblo style building was converted for storage and then apartments between 1930 and 1948. The east elevation portal was constructed by 1973. The approximately 2,000 square foot building is long, rectangular, single story, mostly brick, and is oriented east to west with the front of the building facing south. The structure was built at approximately 18 inches below grade, and at some points, the window sashes are below grade. The building has 4 sections of slightly varied height due to the grade. The windows are wood sash windows, but a few wood casement windows are found on the north elevation. According to the window assessment, 2 windows on the south primary elevation are non-historic 1980s windows, and the doors on all sides of the structure are non-historic 1980s doors as well. Currently, the apartments are used for storage. The 2021 status review case for the structure is the only case on record in the Historic Preservation Office. The applicant proposes the following exterior alterations: to replace 3 doors with 4 light panel doors and widen those doors from 2.5 to 3 feet wide on the primary south elevation. Install an ADA ramp behind the retaining wall on the south side of the building to create access to units A2 and A3. The ramp will have a handrail. Re-roof the structure with tan color TPO roofing material, stucco the building with El Rey cementitious buckskin, and repave the parking lot. Please note that on the south elevation, the applicant was reminded that a railing would be required at the ADA ramp. The drawings have been updated since the packet was issued to reflect the railing at the ramp, and the applicant letter has also been updated to reflect the handrail. I have given you each a paper copy in case you needed that to review. Staff finds that the exception criteria have been met and recommends approval of the application as it complies with 14-5.2D general design standards for all historic districts and 14-5.2E downtown and east side design standards. I stand for questions.
Any questions, board members for Lanny? Appears they do not. Chris?
Madam Chair. I would only apologize for not putting the handrail in until yesterday. But I'm not attaching it to the building, I'm attaching it to the ramp to the building. interfere with.
This is an interesting building, because it was first stables and then apartments, and now it's asking for help, renovate me, and it seems like you're doing a very good job, in my opinion.
And we would point out, we didn't build it 18 inches below grade. Grade has moved.
Right.
So the stables, they must have been able to walk in.
Right.
That's how much we've added in Santa Fe. Lot.
So any questions for Mr. Purvis, board members? Any questions? Anyone in this audience wishing to comment on this case? No one. Anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios, Stephanie Beninazzo. Stephanie, you may unmute. Please state your name and address for the record and be sworn.
Stephanie Beninatto, PO Box 1601, Santa Fe.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do this under the penalties of perjury?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. She has been sworn.
Thank you. I think that the project is, the building is in need of some restoration, renovation. I guess my understanding is that you're going to allow the widening of historic openings because they're required to have 3-foot wide doors now for code. Maybe just a little clarification on that, because excuse me if I didn't get it, but I think the south facade is the primary facade. So I just would like a little more, just justification in the record itself on that part. Thank you. Oh, and one more thing. I think that, again, if the openings are historic, then whatever is replaced in there needs to keep the openings intact. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. You wish to comment?
Madam Chair, yes, we're doing our best to do the minimum change to this elevation. It's keeping the windows that are on either side of the doors and only widening the doors towards the center wall. And that's just so we can provide access for people who are differently able.
Thank you. Member Guida.
Chris, thank you for the response. And I see in the packet are all of your exception criteria responses for these issues, the widening of the doors and all of that. And it's quite an extensive list, and staff agreed with your responses throughout. And I agree with them as well. I also appreciate the clarity of the drawings, that you're very clear into which windows you're retaining and painting, which ones you're refurbishing, which ones are beyond repair and are documented as such and are being replaced in kind. So thank you for a very clear packet. With that, Madam Chair, if there's no further discussion, I'd be happy to make a motion.
Let's do it.
Case 2024-008-936 HDRB 107 East Palace Avenue, units A1, A2, A3. I move that the board approve the project as submitted, noting that the exception criteria have been met.
Either seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Biesheup?
Yes.
Member Degnan?
Yes.
Vice Chair Guida?
Yes.
Member Benvenu? Member Mather?
Yes.
Madam Chair, it has passed. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Is the applicant for 329, oh, never mind, excuse me, let me start that again. Is the applicant for 329 Otero here? Oh, yes. Hi, she's back there. Paul, it is your case. May we hear from you?
Madam Chair, members of the board, in case number 2024008868 HDRB, this is in regards to the single-family residence and site for 329 Otero Street, listed as contributing to the downtown and east side historic district. The 329 Otero Street's north, south, and west facades are designated as primary. The structure is a modest 1,048 square foot structure constructed between 1935 to 1936 in the territorial architectural design style as seen by the adobe block construction material, brick coping, stretcher, dental stretcher courses, and an entry porch facing Otero Street to the west. There was an addition to the southern portion of the structure in 1945. Previous cases included a status review in 2024 with the primary facade designations and an administrative approval for a middle vehicular gate, stucco, and parapet repair. The following exterior alterations proposed are the installation of new doors and windows, for which an exception was requested, and to restructure the entire structure in cementitious stucco color adobe brown. Here we see the north elevation and east elevation. The north elevation being a designated primary facade. The east elevation is not. The south elevation and west elevation, both designated as primary facades. Here's a 1984 New Mexico HBI form photograph of the structure. Here is the survey plat map of the structure, 329 Otero Street in the north, upper northwest corner. Here's the existing and proposed site plan. They're looking at doing the middle vehicular gate, and the in doing some hardscape. Here is the proposed floor plans of the works where they're proposing on installing new wooden doors and windows. Here is on the existing and proposed north elevation, the installation of the new doors and windows. Here on the proposed east, existing and proposed east elevation, the installation of new doors and windows. On the south elevation, same, the installation of the new doors and windows. And on the west elevation. Here is this depiction of the middle vehicular gate that they're proposing on installing as well. Stucco and the light fixtures. So Ray Patterson did a historic assessment on the windows. He identified that C, D, E, G, H, and I are historic windows, and the windows can be restored. Here are the primary facades and the contributing site walls facade diagram. In this window assessment today at the site visit, we reviewed the structure, the windows, and they're in relatively good shape. They're to be taken out, replaced with anodized wooden middle clad windows, takes away from the structure. And in so doing so, staff does not find that all the exception criteria have been met and recommends denial of the exception to replace the historic windows on primary facades of a contributing structure. Staff does recommend approval of the other aspects of the application, the restuccoing, as it complies with 14-5.2D general design standards for all historic districts and 14-5.2E downtown and east side design standards. Staff stands for questions. Thank you.
So Paul, thank you for your report. So all of the historic windows on this building are wood, correct?
Madam Chair, that is correct.
And they are wanting to replace them with metal clad?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And the assessment, the person that did the window assessment said that all the windows were in good condition. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, that is correct.
Thank you. Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarity, the only things that are before us tonight on this case are the windows and the restuccoing of the building. Staff report says that the gate, light fixtures, the wall, all of that stuff was approved already administratively. Is that correct? Okay. And then Paul, as far as the windows go, I mean, besides the condition report, which identifies some windows as historic, does the status designation note the windows as included in the statusing and the designation of primary facades?
Chair Rios, Vice Chair Guida, in the status report, it doesn't designate the status of the windows or doors. It's more of just the east, or pardon me, the north, south, and west facades.
It didn't specifically say, we include the windows as part of the contributing, as part of the primary facade.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair Guida, no, sir.
Okay, thanks.
But the windows are part of those facades, are part of the north, south, and west facades.
Madam Chair.
So when you make that contributing and you make that, primary, does it not include the windows?
Madam Chair, it includes everything on that entire facade.
Or question maybe for you or for anyone on staff, do we have to indicate every time that, yes, we are indicating that everything on that facade is included in the as primary and contributing?
Madam Chair, that's a great question. Generally, we only make exclusions of non-historic materials. So if windows, doors, elements that are non-historic, or talls or some kind of element, we will identify that and designate that as non-historic and excluding that from the rest of the facade.
Heather, did you have something?
Chair Rios, Paul is absolutely correct. So typically the practice of the board is to exclude items if they're not considered part of the historic character of the building and speak to the designation.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Yes, Member Bichai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to confirm my understanding of our typical guidance on these cases. I think we typically require windows that are historic on primary facades to be replaced in kind. And I think we also allow exceptions when those windows are more than 30% deteriorated. And it's a little hard to tell. If you could just let me know if that's correct. And then it's a little hard to tell in the window assessment because they use a range of 30 to 40%. So I don't know if there's an actual percentage given for each particular window. And how can we apply this criteria based on that assessment?
Madam Chair, Member Bescheid, staff would need to take we need to look further into the window assessment in order to give a better approach on the percentage of those windows. Well, given that the site visit today, those windows are relatively well intact.
Any other questions, board members? Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm not pulling up the window assessment report right now, but I thought that the report did say that all the windows were repairable. I don't know what percentage it gave, but I thought that the conclusion of the report was that all of the historic windows were repairable.
Madam Chair, Member Bienvenue, that is correct.
There are no further, yes, Member Beachin.
All right, that's sort of why I was asking, what is our current practice? Am I wrong about the 30% sort of being a threshold for allowing a different approach in restoration?
Madam Chair, Member Bescheid, I defer to senior staff for that answer. You don't currently know.
Member Beachhead, I think I can maybe helpful to read the specific rule that applies to this. I don't believe it gives a specific percentage. It reads, I'm looking at 14-5.2 D5A for all facades of significant and landmark structures, the primary facades of contributing structures. Historic windows shall be repaired or restored wherever possible. Historic windows that cannot be repaired or restored shall be duplicated in the size, style, and material of the original thermal double pane glass may be used, no opening shall be widened or narrowed. And then there's section D1A, removal of historic materials or alteration of architectural features, spaces that embody the status shall be prohibited. So it doesn't give a specific percentage, although I know there is a standard that historic preservation staff has used in the past to gauge that. The 30% or recall. It's asking. Does they have to be more than 30% deteriorated?
Cheerios and numbers. I do believe it's 30%. Percentages.
So that is the practice standard, although it's not expressed in the code.
Any further questions, board members? None. Applicant, Ms. Martinez?
Let's raise your right hand and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Lisa Martinez. My address is 3201C Zaffarano Drive, number 111, Santa Fe, 87507.
Thank you. Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth under the penalties of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Hi, Lisa. And what do you have to tell us?
Madam Chair Rios and members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to present this request this evening. A couple things that I wanted to mention with regard to the window and door historic assessment that Mr. Patterson provided. He has clearly identified which windows and doors are in satisfactory condition, and he's also identified one historic window on the north elevation and 3 historic windows on the south elevation that are in fair condition. Those are the ones that identify the 30 to 40% deterioration on the sashes and in other parts of the windows. Something I want to mention is that when you look at the windows, they actually look like they're in fantastic shape, especially because they have the storm windows, which are placed around them, and those are actually newer. Those were installed to try to address some of the energy conservation concerns with this small building. And I did mention this briefly when I came in for a status review back in February. So there's a couple things that I want to mention in regard to that. So in one of the instances, we're proposing to replace some of these windows because they're just not operable. And when you have them in a space like a bedroom, the code absolutely requires that these windows be operable for an exit in case of emergency, and also to provide access for firefighters to be able to get into the facility. So these egress windows are required in every habitable space, and that is not the case in this particular building. But in addition to the safety concerns associated with egress, the request for replacement of these windows and doors extends to improving the energy efficiency and reducing the cost of current utility bills. The owners are very aware of the city's sustainability programs, and they're very interested in following those. And for that reason, they've placed some solar panels on a couple of the buildings on their property. So their goal is to comply with the city's requirements in terms of energy conservation, but also to comply with historic provisions as well. So their desire to update these windows and doors is critical so that less energy is consumed, and they want to do what they can to update this 90-year-old structure so that it's good for the next 50 years. It's really just not sustainable for them to pay $1,000 over a 3-month period for utility bills. I have attached those as part of the record for your review. So while appearances may make everything look good and beautiful, if you actually, I don't know how closely you looked at things on site today, but if you were to actually take the doors and just push them a little bit, you can see that the wood is so old that everything just sort of bends in and the air is coming through, and it's just not working very well. So I do understand that in the event the board were to approve the replacement, I understand the importance of doing something in kind. And if the board would be willing to accept a wood window as replacement, we would certainly be willing to do that instead of the metal clad, if that helps to match the existing character of the building. And so with that, I would also like to ask Mr. David Rash, our former Historic Preservation Division Director, to add a little bit to this presentation, and then we would stand for any questions. So, thank you.
David, if you'll come forward and get sworn in.
Please state your name and address for the record.
David Rash, 21 Altura Road, Santa Fe.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do this under the penalty of perjury?
Do.
Thank you, Madam Chair. He has been sworn.
Hi, David.
Thank you.
What do you,
Chair,
what do you have to tell us?
I don't know if all of you know me, but I was a historic preservation, preservation planner for 15 years. I did manage the division for 12 years. I was talking with an attorney the other day about how many cases I've brought to the board. And I did the lion's share of the work. I probably brought half of the cases to the board. So let's assume it's an average of 10 per agenda, 10 per month, 120 per year. Let's just say 100 per year. 15 years, that's 1,500 cases. I did bring a lot to you. And I thank staff for helping us put this packet together. I know how much work it takes to do this. So thank you very much. And also during my time here, I've had many land use directors. And I must say that Lisa Martinez probably was my best supporter of all the land use directors I've worked under. And therefore, I want to say that our request for this exception is a very sincere request. I really do mean that. And I'd like to go over some of our information on the 3 exception criteria. First of all, the number 1, do not damage the character of the district. Now, the district is the Downtown and East Side Historic District, and its character is about the streetscape and the built environment and the scale and the design of the buildings, the architectural styles. It's not necessarily about the age of the buildings and the age of the historic materials. That's not really the character. Character is about the appearance. And in this case, what we are proposing to do is replace the windows in kind so that from the public way, from the streetscape, the building will look exactly as it does today. We're just requesting to upgrade the windows. Not only are they in the aesthetic of the territorial revival, but they're also utilizing the white color. And most recently, I've realized that during the Americanization period, when we were trying to become a state, and we started dressing up our adobes, our mud huts, with these territorial details. Very interesting that territorial design usually has white or cream trim. And what hit me was that's really our Greek revival in Santa Fe, mimicking marble material. That's why we're using white in territorial buildings. So I think our proposal does preserve that character of territorial revival design with white trim. Number 2, the hardship to the applicant, as already mentioned by Ms. Martinez, is the utility bills and the difficulty with having these windows and doors work well. I do want to point out that Ray Patterson's report, he doesn't use any standard in assessing the historic windows as good. He uses 4 standards: premium, satisfactory, fair, and unsatisfactory. I have to admit, I'm the guilty one that created this process to help enlighten the ordinance. We have practiced this 30% rule for more than 10 years. And it really was to help us understand what it means by replace or not replace. In this case, he does mention that 4 of our windows are fair, and in his standard, he does say 30 to 40%. So I would not consider the windows that are considered fair to be in good condition, according to this assessor. And again, it's my fault that I created this program. I'm sorry if it's confusing. But in addition to these standards, and that 4 of them are fair, they are certainly repairable. But the point is that half of the building's windows are on the south elevation. And we know when there's no trees to provide shade, the south elevation does to exposed wood. So it's very difficult for older windows to be repaired and retained. But mostly it's that climate action plan that the city is getting into with sustainability. I'm aware of many jurisdictions in historic preservation that aren't as strict as ours. For example, even the state. One of my favorite territorial revival buildings is the Viagra building on Galisteo across from the old state capitol. That is a significant historic building on your register. And the state replaced all of those historic windows. They understand sustainability. And I know a member of the board members here on the same committee to rewrite the historic code, where we're looking at sustainability issues for the rewrite. It is quite interesting that in climate change, we do need to look at the standards for historic preservation. And these are the ones we're considering about sustainability and climate change. Now, lastly, strengthen the unique heterogeneous character of the city by providing a full range of design options. This criterion is about design options. And the design options are where you can come up with other things other than replace in kind. And that's why we initially were looking into the design option of metal clad, especially on the south elevation for longer maintenance. But it's nice to know that we're willing to give wood windows instead of clad windows in this case. But it's really about the sustainability issue, and the downtown and east side historic district does not deny the ability to use metal clad windows. We are sticking with the traditional historic light pattern in these windows. We just wish to replace them. So if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Board members, do you have questions for Mr. Rash or Ms. Martinez? Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions really, but just a few comments. So, this is probably one of the areas that's the most contentious that repetitively comes before us are windows. Because I've always felt, as long as I've been in Santa Fe and as long as anyone has had any renovation to be done in the historic districts, that this has always been a severe sticking point for homeowners. The inability to change the windows out to make them double pane, triple pane, whatever they wanted to do. And that's true in all historic districts, as far as I can tell, around the country, because I hear the same story being told by many, many people who talk about what happened to their mother or their neighbor or whoever the case may be, that couldn't change the windows that were so energy inefficient because they were historic. And I certainly understand all of that. But I've always felt that we on this board are not policymakers. We're quasi-judicial volunteer members of the community that apply the ordinance as written through the wisdom of the governing body. And that is the regulation that we then apply to the facts of the case. In this particular case, we have an ordinance that is, in this area, extremely clear. It says that historic windows shall not be removed unless they're not repairable. And only when they're not repairable shall they be replaced. Then they are required to be replaced in kind. So to me, that's not something that we get to quibble over as to whether or not that means that energy efficiency should trump. What it does mean is that we always have a factual question as to what is repairable in a particular instance. And as far as in the time I've been on the board, we've had this come before us on many occasions. We have, my knowledge, always required a window assessment before we will make a determination as to whether or not historic windows should be removed and replaced or whether they should be repaired. And we've been relying frequently on Ray Patterson's reports for that information. And it is true that his report does speak in terms of 30 to 40%. And perhaps at one time there was an unofficial understanding that 30% was the threshold. As far as I know, we have always applied Ray Patterson's in the cases in which he did the assessment, his personal assessment criteria. And in his criteria, he divides the status of the windows into either restorable or not restorable. And the difference between the restorable ones, it's true, varies percentage-wise. But as far as I know, we have always said that when he says they can be restored, which is the case here, that we've required that they be restored, regardless of what his percentage assessment is. So I feel that maybe that's wrong, in which case it should go before the governing body in a code rewrite for reconsideration. But that's been the practice of this board. I think it's an appropriate interpretation of the ordinance, which is very clearly written in this case. And I think it would be very unfair to all the people who, in the last 4 years that I've been on the board, have had window requests denied when they have asked for replacements, as is the case here, and gave the exact same rationales in every case for doing so. It would be unfair to now alter our approach to these cases. So
Thank you.
I think that leads obviously to me thinking that it being in agreement with the staff report, but not necessarily disagreeing with the point of view of the applicant so much as that is a governing body determination, not this board's, in my view.
Any other comments or questions? No other comments or questions? Anyone in this audience wishing to comment on this particular case? No one. Anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios, Stephanie Beninato, who has previously been sworn.
Thank you, Stephanie Beninato. I appreciate Member Bienvenu's comments, and I do think that if the law is clear that you need to apply it, because otherwise it becomes very subjective and you become inconsistent. And I think, again, in a rewrite, maybe sustainability, if it's important, will get some weight, but it right now doesn't have weight. And I think the ones that are considered, if there are any that are considered not operable or not repairable, then I guess you could replace those. And I wonder also how many are not on I mean, there's only one non-primary facade, but how many windows being replaced on that one? And I also want to point out that that the doors can be replaced, and sealing up leaky doors, getting thicker doors will definitely help some of that problem. And maybe, I don't know, like insulating the roof more, something to allow some energy conservation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Board members, if you have no further questions or comments, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, just one comment. So I too am sympathetic to the cause of energy conservation, particularly when it comes to windows and how buildings perform and how that affects who can afford to live in the historic districts, and how sustainable our city is. That said, it's not a kind of either or situation in preservation environments. I think what I'm a little confounded. There's certainly blind spots in the code. And, you know, this kind of strict rule that we have about, you know, repair, leaves out, the middle ground between, you know, repairing an existing single pane or wood window, and what's proposed in the packet, which is actually vinyl windows, which, you know, I think this board would never allow, on a contributing building. You know, I think there would, you know, had this been a case that proposed new wood windows or in-kind replacements with insulated glazing, you know, we might be having a different discussion tonight. Our code also doesn't really kind of carve out that territory. But to me, that would be a kind of an acceptable middle ground in concept, for a project such as this. It may be more cost effective to repair, all of these. I would say it definitely would be. And from what I'm seeing in the photographs and in the building is just, you know, maintenance and repair issues, big air gaps around these doors, big air gaps around the storm panels and stuff like that. Those in a reconditioning of existing windows could be substantially addressed and dramatically improve the energy performance of the building, and while being cost effective. The assumption that you know, windows are also maintenance free is, you know, is really, you know, not here nor neither here nor there. Nothing in buildings is truly maintenance free.
Thank you, Member Guida. Any other comments or questions? I will entertain a motion, please. Member Benvenu.
I'd love for you to. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Case number 2024-008868, HDRB 329 Otero Street. I move that, consistent with staff's recommendation, that findings be entered that the exception criteria have not been met for replacement of the historic windows, and that request is therefore denied. I'm speaking on the primary facade, but that all other aspects of the application be approved.
Either seconds.
Roll call vote or anything further to add?
I just wonder if there's an opportunity for and if the applicant was interested in agreeing to a condition to repair the windows as suggested by the window assessment. That can be accommodated at this time, or does that require another hearing?
I didn't know that. Does that need to come before the board to repair the windows?
Chair Rios, member Bienvenu, no, that's just part of maintenance. It's administrative.
I think that member Beachside is wanting to ask if the applicants are willing to actually repair the windows, because the application is, the motion is stating that it's denied, but if the applicant is willing to repair.
I mean, Madam Chair, I believe that the applicant has the right to repair the windows and presumably will repair the windows to gain greater efficiencies, regardless of the board's denial of the request to replace them.
Or they can appeal to the city council.
To replace them.
Right. Yeah. I'll take your question in a little minute, but we're in the middle of a motion. So let me ask for the roll call vote on the motion.
Madam Chair, if I may interrupt, just one friendly amendment to the motion for the non-historic, non-primary facade windows. Just a friendly amendment to clarify that the replacement windows shall not be vinyl, as this is in the packet, and that
they will be wood.
They will be wood windows.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Do you accept that? Maker of the motion?
Yes, I do.
You accept it? Okay, may we have a roll call vote, please, Amanda?
Member Guida,
Yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Benvenu,
Yes.
Member Beefshide,
Yes.
Member Degnan.
Yes.
Madam Chair, your motion has passed.
Thank you. And Lisa?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, I just wanted to add that the the information that's in your packet with regard to the vinyl windows was a prior submittal going back several months. I actually submitted two other quotes for window replacements. One of them that was wood with metal clad and another one that was just wood. So I apologize that that did not make it into your packet, but that was something that we were willing to consider from way back when. And that goes back to discussions that I had with Mr. Duran and also with Mr. Ramon Sarason when he was the case planner for this project. So I apologize that that did not make it in the packet, but we were certainly willing to do all wood windows if the board was willing to consider that as replacement.
Thank you for your comments, and I don't think that that would change the board's motion, correct? Maker of the motion and, right? Yeah. Thank you very much. And we're going to move on to the next case. Is the applicant for 1292 Lejano Lane here? He is here. And Lanny, may we hear from you?
Okay, this is case 2024-8945 at 1292 Lejano Lane for new construction of a guest house. The subject property is located on the south of the road, just west of Gonzales and east of Lorenzo Road. The existing residential structure is a 3,700 square foot residence built in 2019 in the downtown and east side historic district. The site has a steep grade and sits at the corner of Lejano Lane and Lorenzo Road. It has public visibility from both roads. The applicant is proposing to construct a 1,902 square foot detached accessory dwelling unit with 1,430 square feet of heated space and 472 square feet of portals to a height of 16 feet 6 inches, where the maximum allowable height is 14 feet 5 on the sloping slide. The elevation change is over 2 feet, and the board may grant an additional 4 feet of height per section 14-5.2 D9 C2F. This is their floor plan. On the north elevation, there will be a 5 foot by 9 foot fenestration on the eastern end to enter under the east portal where the main entry doors are located. Moving to the west, there are openings consisting of 5 3 foot by 3 foot awning windows and 2 triple 3 foot by 9 foot high door panels. On the west end, there is a portal over the windows. The portal will have a concrete floor with integral color Omaha tan and sand finish, and the walls and ceiling will be finished with white lime plaster. On the west elevation, there are 2 3 foot by 3 foot awning windows side by side, making each opening 3 foot by 6. And the HVAC condensers will be hung on the wall. On the south elevation, there's a single 3 foot by 3 foot awning window, and there are four 12-inch by 8-inch metal canales with 2-inch projections and 4 by 4 basins for piping to the pond. And on the east elevation, there's a single large opening consisting of 4 5 foot by 9 foot panels. There's a partially enclosed portal, which is accessed from the north elevation and has an open area to the north end of the east wall. The portal will have a concrete floor with Omaha tan and sand finish, and the walls and ceiling will be finished with white lime plaster. There is also a 4.5 foot high yard wall projecting from the wall to lead to the entrance and screen the walkway. The full residence will be finished in La Habra Belle Glade stucco to match the main residence. Windows and doors are black aluminum finish. Exterior lighting will consist of 5 4-inch recessed can lights on the north portal, 8 recessed can lights on the east portal, and a WAC step light at 16 inches above ground at the entrance of the east portal. On the field trip today, it was asked if the corners of the residence were intended to be bullnosed. Per the packet, they are not. The intent is to have them in the same angles as those of the main residence. That might be negotiable with the agent. Staff does recommend approval of the proposed project and finds that the application complies with section 14-5.2D, general design standards for all historic districts, and 14-5.2E, downtown and east side design standards. Stand for questions.
Thank you, Lanny. Lanny, would you characterize this architectural style as very modernistic with very sharp edges, large expanses of glass? Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes, I would call it very contemporary.
And does the present ordinance allow this style specifically?
In downtown and east side, no.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Member Beachey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lanny, was the main house approved by this board?
Yes, it was.
Do you know when it was built?
2019.
Thank you. Applicant, if board members have no further questions, the applicant will come forward.
Hi, please raise your right hand and state your name and address for the record.
Ms. Hughes, 1409.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do this under the penalty of perjury? Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Hughes, and you have the floor.
I think she explained the project well. Any questions from you guys? I'm happy to answer any clarifications that you might need.
Questions for Mr. Hughes, board members? Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it was mentioned that the exterior condensing units would be wall hung. They're not shown in the drawings. Where would they be located?
They would be on the west elevation. They need hanging windows. There's two.
Okay, would they be screened?
Yes, initially I was going to screen it with a simple metal surround with a rusted patina. And I was told, far down the road that I would need an exception for that. If I were to go that route, and it would take me off of being at this hearing. And so I said to just, and I'd already been put back 2 weeks, you kind of either need to get going on this or not. So I wanted to go ahead and get approval for the guest house. And then in a separate, they also wanted to do an entry gate, and in a separate application, then I would apply for that. Otherwise, if I wasn't granted, to be able to do it with a rusted patina, just a coyote fence would be fine, and again, it's on that elevation that it's certainly not seen from the street or really any properties.
Okay. It needs to be screened.
Yeah.
I think, what we should, do in the discussion tonight is just kind of make a recommendation that it be screened with a coyote fence.
That sounds good to me.
I think that would be a smart play. And then, if you want to change it to something that's acceptable or otherwise code compliant from there, that would be fine. There was the discussion briefly of the style of the residence, and while I would say that the drawings are pretty minimal, I'm assuming that this matches the style of the existing residence.
Very much so, yes.
And Lanny, you didn't say so in the report, but given that this is in the downtown and East Side Historic District, I assume the style of this building, in your view, would be recent Santa Fe style?
Would be my opinion.
Okay. And, to my knowledge, I'm not seeing anything in the design that's not compliant with recent Santa Fe style. I'm not aware of a bullnose requirement for corners in the code. So, I would be willing to recognize this as recent Santa Fe style. That's all.
Thank you, Member Guida. Any other comments or questions? Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Member Guida and I've had a long running disagreement on what recent Santa Fe style means. And I guess I'm confused now with the staff's report because staff just indicated that this design does not comply with the ordinance, but yet the staff report recommends approval. And then just heard staffs agree that it complies with recent Santa Fe style. So I'd like some clarification on that. I will say, though, that in my mind, this most definitely is the antithesis of Santa Fe style. I don't know how the main house was approved in the first instance. I was not on the board. I have a feeling it's possible it was because the drawings, if they were as rudimentary as these drawings are, that the board may not have realized what was being proposed. This is really the sketchiest, that's not a judgment, the most sketch-like rudimentary drawings I've seen in maybe ever on this in an application before the board, and it's very difficult. I think for many people to visualize exactly what you have in mind, unless they saw the main house on site.
Did you indeed see the?
Yes, yes.
You obviously did not care for the main house.
It's not whether I care for it at all. I have no personal opinion. It's not my judgment, not an aesthetic choice.
It's a simple.
I don't agree that it fits Santa Fe style whatsoever, though.
It's
That's
a
your
simple
question.
line drawing to scale. It's a minimal aesthetic. So these drawings represent, what is to be built.
Okay.
Doesn't have a lot of embellishments.
Right.
But anyway.
We tend to now see what you probably presented to the client, which were some renderings, some three-dimensional renderings, color, something that shows it on site, something that shows it with the existing building next to it. Pure elevation drawings that look like they're hand-drawn are, I think, very, very difficult for the board to visualize exactly what you have in mind. Again, other than the fact that you said it will look like the main house. And if you go to see it on site, you'll see exactly what's being proposed.
And these drawings meet the requirements of the city. And there's nothing that says that they need to be computer drafted drawings.
There isn't,
So,
no. But I would, just to say that it's helpful to the board to have drawings that do a better job of
Sure.
showing and renderings of showing what the project will actually look like.
Thank you, Member Benvenu. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Member Bichai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you describe the visibility of the main house and this house? From Lejano Lane and any other public?
almost zero visibility. From Lejano Lane, and I have some photographs, but it was hard from Lejano Lane to even see the most eastern, story poles. And from Lorenzo, it's very well screened. Really, you don't see much, but I have some photographs.
Yeah. Is it possible to see the photographs also for the public to see what we're talking about? I think the terrain there is quite hilly and the roads sit higher than the site. Is that correct? Or is it the opposite?
Site's much, well, Lejano is much higher, of course, than Lorenzo. So the home is closer in elevation to Lejano.
Yeah.
And Lorenzo, it's certainly.
And Lanny, do you know if this approval, the previous approval of the main house was by exception or not?
No, there was no exception.
Thank you.
Got those photos?
Yes, please do.
IT, can you please turn on the Elmo overhead for photographs to display?
Mean by both sides, very little of the main home. Another photograph. Further down behind, maybe. Let's see, maybe. Find out. Yeah, I don't see it. I know it's back there. But really, you don't see it whatsoever. And this is from Lorenzo. It's the photo that I take, most of it showing a swat there, 44.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments, board members? Yes, member BJ.
Just a quick comment, because I think I was on the board in 2019, and I believe when we approved this house, it was largely, I mean, there was a lot of the same discussion about the style difference from what we're typically used to seeing in the downtown East Side Historic District, but the fact that you couldn't see much of it played a large part in our decision. And I think that what you did see just appears as sort of a solid wall. We didn't see any of the modern sort of fenestrations or other elements that might be sort of distracting. So that's what I recall.
Any comments? Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, yeah, on the public visibility issue, I just wanted to comment that public visibility in the code is relevant to the windows. It's not relevant to the style, though. There's no style exception for, it depends on whether or not a building is publicly visible. So that certainly would impact things like the size of the window panes and so forth under our code, but it does not, it's not a carve out for styles that don't otherwise meet either old Santa Fe style or recent Santa Fe style in this particular district. And as far as public visibility here goes, I would say that it is somewhat minimal directly from the driveway on Lejano, but it is visible. I'm standing on the site. You see a vast expanse of Santa Fe, East Side Santa Fe below you, and many, many, many houses. So clearly they are also, and roads, but clearly they're looking back at this as well, because it is set up on a hill compared to the alley upon which it looks down. As far as the recent Santa Fe style issue and bullnosing, the reason I always emphasize bullnose, even though that those words are not used in the code, is the code does require more recent Santa Fe style that the dominating effect be of adobe construction, and a sharp edged corner, of which the current house is probably the most extreme sharp edged corner that's feasible in construction techniques. Is not consistent with it appearing to be or being of adobe construction, which is around it. That's all I have.
Thank you. Anything else? Member BJ.
All right, Madam Chair, just one more thing. I think just to recognize that our staff has not determined an exception for style is required in this case. So, you know, whether you might disagree with that or not, we're not being asked to approve this under exception.
Anyone in this room wishing to comment on this particular case? No. Anyone on Zoom wishing to comment?
Yes, there are two. The first one is Raja Bose. Raja, please state your name and address for the record and be sworn.
Raja Bose, 212 Lorenzo Lane.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do this under the penalties of perjury?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, I'm just the neighbor basically directly to the south of this house. And the first thing I want to say is that Thomas is an awesome person and designer and builder, and the house that is there is really gorgeous, and I think gives Santa Fe only a better building to look at. My concern is more to do with the height, which actually no one on the board has mentioned, so maybe I'm totally out of place. But I noticed that the height is I guess allowed because of the slope is what I understood from Lanny just now. But in any case, definitely a little tall for its situation, which is already obviously upslope from me. And it's certainly not my personal preference only that matters. But just to say that, we went to great lengths to keep our house, which we recently remodeled, and I was the designer and builder of, to be, literally physically as short as humanly possible for our neighbors and the sunlight and the view corridors and whatnot. And yeah, so just that the overall height definitely seemed a little tall next to like our structure, but we're also downhill from it, so it's a matter of perspective. And anyway, yeah, that was my one conflict. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. We have someone else?
Yes, Chair Rios, Stephanie Beninato, who has previously been sworn.
Thank you.
Good evening, Stephanie Beninato. I don't think, first of all, I don't think you can really rely on vegetation to say whether something's visible or not, because that vegetation can go away. And I could see the story poles in at least one of those photos very clearly. I also agree with Member Bienvenu's comments about recent Santa Fe style. It's not just that it's stuccoed over or, I don't know, has some like canales sticking out of it. I think it is about that it replicates on some level historic building styles, which are lower, rounder, smaller windows. And for me, I think the windows are really out of place. It's too much glass, too high. And if they were lowered, certainly you wouldn't have to maybe go up so high. And also just less glass. It's just so out of keeping with the massiveness that people do associate with Santa Fe style. And again, recent Santa Fe style doesn't mean modern style. It means, again, using more modern materials to achieve the look of the old Santa Fe style without, without fawning about it. But again, the amount of glass here, I think, is really inappropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else on Zoom?
No, Chair Rios.
Thank you. Question for Lanny. Does not the ordinance require in this district, which is the downtown east side, for windows to be divided?
Only if they're publicly visible.
Say that again?
Only if they're publicly visible.
Feel that none of the windows on this house that are being proposed are publicly visible?
The publicly visible side, this from Lorenzo, is the doorway to the house. But it is mass glass, but it is under a portal.
Even though there's a lot of neighbors down the hill that can see this house.
Because the single pane is under the 4 tall, it's allowed.
So are these neighbors on a public way?
Lorenzo Road? Yes,
Yeah. So it can be seen from a public way.
yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a note, I remember having some of this discussion when the main house was approved. We did have a back and forth about one, if I remember correctly, one window that was publicly visible. And, the proposal was for a compliant window of, old-timey divided lights to be located in that one location. And we indicated that an exception would be approved based on consistency with the rest of the house, and that the overall house was of a piece, had a design idea, and was compliant with recent Santa Fe style. I don't see anything here that is not recent Santa Fe style. We have, there is glazing. It is below, it is all, the larger expanses of it are, as staff has indicated, under portals, whether this, building was as traditional as possible or as crisp as this one, the same rule would apply about those windows being allowed in those indications. It's a wall-dominated building. It's a room block massing. There's differentiation in the parapets. It's got a flat roof. It has canales. It has small window apertures where we don't have portals. So I am confident this meets the requirements of recent Santa Fe style as is defined in the code within the downtown and East Side Historic District.
Thank you, Member Guida, for your comments. Any other comments or questions before I ask for a motion? No further comments or questions. Motion, please. Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll move to, I move that the board, I'm sorry, case 2024-008-945 HDRB 1292 Lejano Lane. I move that the board approve the project as submitted, noting that the height above 14 feet is within the allowable limit that is at the discretion of this board because of a steep and sloping site, and that the applicant has indicated that he will screen the mechanical units on the west elevation with a coyote fence, and then he just update the drawings and submit them to staff for final approval.
Is there a second to this motion?
HDI will second.
Is there anything further to add? Nothing further to add. Roll call vote, please.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Benvenu, Member Guida,
Yes.
Member Degnan,
Yes.
Member Bichet.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion has passed.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue. Next case is located at 119 Kearney, and this is also Lanny's case.
Give me 1 second, my computer went to sleep. Sorry about that. Can you get the TVs turned back on, please? Thank you. Okay, this is case 2024-8937 at 119 Kearney Road for alterations to a previous approval for a remodel. 119 Kearney is located on the north side of the 1 block road. The single-family residential structure is contributing to the downtown and east side historic district with the east, south, and west elevations as primary. The 1967 Spanish Pueblo Revival residence is 2 stories with a historic footprint of 879 square feet, an enclosed 146 square foot porch, and a 272 square foot deck were added in the 1980s, bringing the total square footage to 1,297 square feet. It has a low yard wall, characteristic of yard walls and fences in the streetscape, and the yard wall is designated as contributing. A major remodel was approved in 2021. The applicant made alterations outside of the scope of that approval, which were found during inspections. Therefore, the applicant now requests approval of these constructed changes. The addition's roof was lowered by 12 inches. This is to maintain the 6-inch difference between the historic home and the addition. The original house was lower than originally measured. This lowering of the roof resulted in the elimination of a clear story window on the west elevation. On the north elevation, the approved coyote fence railing has had pilasters added to the design. This railing originally did not include the north side of the east portal, but has been extended to include it. It was noted on the field trip today that the framework for the coyote fence is on the outside where it should be on the interior. A sidewalk has been installed at the north end of the property, leading from the parking area to the eastern yard and northern garden area. Exterior stairs have been added at each the north and the west garden areas. Exterior lighting has been added at the doors. On the east elevation design had a staircase leading from the courtyard to the lower yard. This has been removed from the overall design, and the wall has been extended through the area to prevent falls. The compressors that were originally hidden by the stairs have now been screened with a 5-foot-high coyote fence with varying latias. In the courtyard on the east and south elevations, the doors were installed without the approved divided lights. These doors are stepped in from the building and are between the addition and original building and are not publicly visible. The east elevation windows were reglazed. On the south elevation, the doors in the west and south primary facades were replaced. No window and door assessment is available, and the windows and doors have been replaced. Therefore, the historic integrity of the windows can no longer be evaluated. The front steps on the south entry have a second step due to the height of the step down. The south elevation windows were reglazed. The south elevation original single pane door was replaced with a divided light door, and exterior lighting has been added at the doors. On the west elevation, the doors in the west primary facades were replaced. Doors have divided lights, no window and door assessments available. The west primary facade had 2 matching steel frame windows. Only one was remaining in the original application. The one on the south had been removed and an air conditioner and a half-sized sliding aluminum window had been installed. This window has been restored to the original size with a steel sash window to match the original window. They also removed the window in the middle on the second floor. Pilasters have been added to the approved coyote fence railing. A gutter and downspout were added at the north side of the portal, and true divided lights were added to the glass doors that were approved without the divided lights. The fireplace is rounded rather than rectangular, and exterior lighting has been added at the doors and above the exterior stairs by the window on the west elevation. On the field trip, the approval for the metal pedestrian gates on the south and north elevations was questioned. Staff does not find where these gates have been approved. They are also not listed as part of this request. Metal gates would require an exception to be approved per section 14-5.2D5B. Also, there was a question if the window and doors that were replaced on the primary facade should have had an exception request for the removal of the historic materials. It was not originally asked for by staff because the work is complete and there's no way to assess the missing windows and doors to determine if they are historic material. However, staff did do some research and we found that they are included as part of the primary facade, so that exception probably should have been requested. Staff recommends approval. That was nice. Staff recommends approval of the proposed project and finds that the application complies with section 14-5.2D general standards and the 5.2E downtown and east side design standards.
Thank you, Lanny. Board members, questions for Lanny at this time? There's not. Applicant, please come forward. Mr. Hoops.
State your name and address for the record.
Craig Hoops, 333 Montezuma.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do this under the penalty of perjury? Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Hoops. That was a lot that Lanny told us. And do you have further things to add?
First of all, I want to apologize to the board.
Board members, do you have questions at this time for Mr. Hoops? It appears they do not. Does anyone in this room want to comment on this particular case? There's not. Anyone on Zoom? No? I will entertain a motion. Moving right along. Member Guida?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with staff. None of the changes are not in compliance with the district standards. In case 2024-008-937 HDRB 119 Kearney Road, I move that the board approve the project as submitted, agreeing with staff's recommendation that the proposed project complies with the general design standards for all historic districts and the downtown and east side design standards as well.
Do I hear a second?
May there seconds?
And roll call vote, please.
Member Benvenu,
Yes.
Vice Chair Guida,
Yes.
Member Bescheid.
Yes.
Member Degnan,
Yes.
Member Mather.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion has passed.
Mr. Hoops, that was painless. Sounds like and you can confer with staff They'll guide you on that. You're welcome. So I imagine that the lone person that is here for the last case on Camino de Cruz Blanca. And Lanny, may we hear from you?
Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, this is case 2024-8999 for 1160 Camino Cruz Blanca. I'm sorry, 8990 for 1160 Camino de Cruz Blanca for an exception for fencing materials. St. John's College is located at 1160 Camino de Cruz Blanca within the Historic Review Historic District. The buildings within the campus are statused in 2017 with a combination of significant contributing and non-contributing statuses. This project comes before the board for approval due to the material used, which requires an exception. We're discussing the ball courts. Their location is up along Camino de Cruz Blanca, and that was approved by the Planning Commission as part of their 2008 development plan. The chain link fences were approved as part of this development plan, and they were also approved as part of case H13-041 in 2013. Case 2023-664 admin included the replacement of the courts and the chain link fences that surround them. The applicant is proposing to install a windscreen at the publicly visible tennis courts with an opacity of approximately 80% in a green color. The screen will be installed on a 12-foot tall green rubber coated chain link fence at 2 feet from the ground and will be 8 feet in height, which places the top of the screen at 10 feet off the ground. The windscreen mesh is constructed of vinyl coated mesh, and an exception is requested to install a fence constructed of prohibited materials. The screen will be installed at a 12-foot tall green rubber coated. I think I just said that. I like to repeat myself, apparently, sorry. The windscreen mesh is constructed of vinyl coated mesh. Let's see, I did that twice. Staff finds that while a windscreen is appropriate for ball courts, a more transparent option would be less intrusive to the historic district. These proposed elevations are provided by the applicant. I will note they're a little hard to tell just how opaque the material is. So staff did a field comparison of the proposed screen to that of the Fort Marcy ball courts. Fort Marcy ball courts are not in the historic district, but they were the only ones we knew about. As you can see with the Fort Marcy courts, the above screen is open enough to be seen through, but solid enough to prevent issues with the wind. The proposed screen at St. John's has holes that are about 1/2 the size of the openings at Fort Marcy. And after discussion with staff, the applicant has offered more samples with varying opacity. Since these are difficult to see in the images, the physical samples have been provided to the board to view. Ms. Rios has those.
I think this is what they are proposing, correct?
That is the one that is currently being proposed.
And I'll pass it around. That's where it's a little more tight than, I would say, than.
Correct. Now,
This one.
the two larger samples are are each more open than the one that's currently being
And they are of
proposed.
different material as well.
Yes.
And these are the colors that they are asking for, green.
Yes, they want green.
Is this also green?
That just happens to be a black sample, but they are wanting it in green. The mesh that is there is, one of the newer samples is a 68% opacity, and staff agrees that this would be a preferred amount. Staff does not find that all of the exception criteria have been met and that a less opaque option would be more appropriate. Therefore, staff recommends denial of the application as it does not comply with 14-5.2D general design standards for all historic districts or 14-5.2F historic review design standards.
Thank you. Lanny, could you repeat to us how the screen is going to be used and what portions it's going to cover?
So they're going to have the chain link fence is actually 12 feet high. So it's going to be towards the center. There's going to be like a 2-foot open space at the bottom and 2 feet open space at the top. And it will be
And
around all
the portion that they do want to cover, what is that measurement?
8 feet.
8 feet. Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Lanny? Or comments? Member Benvenue? Okay. So no questions. Applicant, please come forward.
Hi, please raise your right hand and state your name and address for the record.
Abby Feldman, 440 San Pasqual Street.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth, the whole truth, and do this under the penalty of perjury? Thank you.
Hello. Good evening. Thank you for your patience. And what do you have to tell us?
As far as I understand, the college is very willing to use the less opaque material in the court. So that was my understanding that we were going to be discussing that option tonight. And that's what we were hoping to cover.
Questions? Member Benvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you for that concession. I guess, I was a little concerned about the application because it seems that it's not exactly accurate. It says your responses to all the exception criteria related to the public. And when we were on site today, there was a very large sign saying it was not open to the public. It was restricted to students. So that strikes me as a very significant difference of fact in this case.
Yeah, I think that is confusing. I guess we were trying to respond to the visibility issues of the public.
Can you put that mic closer to your mouth? Thank you.
Sorry,
Oh.
I'm sorry if there was
I think it comes.
confusion around that, but I think our responses in the package were trying to address more issues from the public in terms of the visibility from the roadway and pedestrians walking through the area, not necessarily the actual users of the court.
Well, actually, you didn't address that first aspect, but the application did address the second. It said that this will allow the public to increase its health during a large variety of weather conditions, It will provide residents with the ability to play tennis on windy days, making residing in the district more desirable.
Fair point. That is confusing language. I, yeah, I believe so that if the courts are only available to the students, it's not the public at large, but certainly that student body and their staff, which is, a decently sized population, would benefit from all of those, healthy amenities.
Sure. I'm just bringing it to your attention because we rely on the information and the application. Most people would not even have known. I wouldn't have known that it wasn't open to the public. And that was actually potentially a very significant factor to me, just as it appears to be to the person putting the application together. And the only reason I at least learned that it wasn't true was by being on site today. So I guess I would just ask that there be more care given to the information that's presented to the board. Just from a general perspective, I would say that I don't think that just needing some protection from the wind would normally qualify as meeting the exception criteria in this case. The courts did not have that previously for all the years that they were there before they were just restored. The courts right down the street, it's city courts at Adelaide, do not have any windscreens. There are numerous examples of lack of windscreens. So I don't see there being any hardship here at all. However, it does seem that I'm struck by the, as you put it in the application, the very brightly covered paving, which seems inappropriate in the district. I'm also curious how that was approved, as opposed to just typical green surfacing in a tennis court. It's extremely distracting driving by on the road to see those bright blue courts. And because of that, I think that we almost need some screening just to try to ameliorate to some extent that really, to my mind, very inappropriate color scheme on these courts in this historic district. So, yeah.
The court colors were originally picked when the screen was going to be installed, right? So there was not, that wasn't a consideration, I think, as much, thinking that they would be screened. So now that they are more visible, it's a little more apparent. And I know that vegetation can, disappear, but the college did put quite an effort into doing a lot of new evergreen tree screening. I think I can't recall exactly, like 20 new trees that are going to be planted, that have been planted already in front of the courts to also help with that over time. And I think that was what that rendering, we were trying to help understand what that would look like with the mature vegetation in front of it as well.
Okay. Yeah, and I very much appreciate the fact that the college did do that planting because it helps tremendously, actually.
And also, I myself am not a tennis player, but I did learn recently that it's not necessarily just the wind factor that it's called windscreen, but actually a lot of the benefit of the screen is more about ball visibility and that player experience in terms of cutting down glare and being able to see the ball better, give some privacy for the players as well.
Right. So given all of that, I, at least, just my personal opinion, I have no idea where the rest of the board is, would be willing to accept some sort of a compromise measure where part of the fencing is screened. For example, but I do think it would be important that the screening be on the lower part of the court because that's what is necessary to be cut down as far as the visual effect in the area from the brightly covered paving. So is there any reason why it screening couldn't be at the 67% opacity and be 6 feet tall, but from the ground level as opposed to being installed in the center?
No, I certainly think we could discuss that with the college. I can't make that decision on my own, but I don't think that would be that.
Right. Because I think that would solve everybody's problems, because it would help screen to some extent the color of the pavement. It would provide the windscreening and the privacy for the players. It would provide the backdrop for them for visibility of the ball. And it would really help with the transparency of the entire structure, which is very important. I mean, when you remove that, what was literally looked like 100% opaque material that was on it previously, it was a vast improvement, because once again, just as before, you could see the hills behind it, you could see the buildings, you could see the trees. If the lower part of that was screened, the upper part was kept open, I think that you'd have your win-win on that, would be my view. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm satisfied that students at the college are residents in our historic district. And they may not represent all residents, but they are residents there. The question I have is really what's under consideration here. Is it the 68% fabric? You know, it's quite a difference between, you know, this, you know, opacity aside, this is clearly a product for wind, and says so, and then indicates that it is a shading component of 70 to 80%. And that's in line with, I think, what's originally proposed. This is a sun shading fabric and not a wind fabric. And so I guess, you know, if the purpose of this exercise is wind blockage, is this even viable?
Well, so the Amoresco is the entity, the company that does a lot of the management and construction of projects for the college. So they have been the one relaying these materials directly to the stakeholders at the college. And from what we understand, the one that's like you are pointing out, maybe more like a shade fabric is acceptable to the college.
For wind.
For wind purposes, but also I think because of what I've learned too, it's not, you know, the wind fabric isn't actually, doesn't actually cut the wind down that significantly, that it's actually really more about this issue of ball visibility and player experience, not as much about wind.
Okay, so then it would be this product, 68% transparency, and in this color, which is green. And
Yeah.
it just happens to have a black border. Okay, that's great. You know, the other thing that I would just say as a general comment, I appreciate, Lanny, you doing the research and photographing other city parks in the historic districts and doing a comparison that's helpful. I think, you know, one of the things that it shows for me is that, you know, a black fence rather than a green fence and black mesh rather than green mesh tend to disappear a little bit or recede more in our landscape than a green color, because not a lot of green vegetation around very often in our Santa Fe landscape.
This site though does happen to be extremely green.
Yes, yeah.
Unlike a lot of Santa
Yes,
Fe
yeah.
with the playing lawn field right next to it.
Fair enough, fair enough. And you know, I would support the green color just because the fence is already green. Okay, thank you.
Anything else? I just have a question that really doesn't necessarily pertain to what we're talking about in the big picture. But I'm a tennis player and I've played in probably every court in Santa Fe, including these courts before they were remodeled. And wind factor. Santa Fe doesn't have that much wind, really, to tell you the very truth. I've played at different times of the day in long tournaments all day long. And I have not experienced a lot of wind. But because of the circumstances that are presented to us this evening, then to try to hide some of that, the coloring, I think, of the quartz, and to hide the blueness of the quartz. Yeah, I think it would be appropriate to have at least this color. And perhaps the suggestion that Member Benvenu indicated, having you go from the ground up X number of feet to try to hide the blueness, would probably be the best idea. And I agree with Member Benvenu in that.
It'd be great if we
reasoning.
can stick with our original 8-foot swath, but just, I think it's not probably an issue to move it down.
I don't know what other members feel about that, but anyway. There's no one in the audience, and is there anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios, Stephanie Beninato, who has previously been sworn. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie Beninato. I think if you're going to approve something, I think that Member Bienvenu's suggestion is a good compromise. And I think 8 feet is excessive, especially if there really isn't all that much wind. My understanding is St. John's is down to about 200 students, so it's rather small. And public does not mean students who are members of the college. They may be residents of that district, but the application definitely said the public were going to be able to play on those courts. And it's clear from the sign that that's not true. And I just think people, applicants have a responsibility to be accurate. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to assume no one else is on Zoom, so I will entertain a motion. Yes, Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Case number 2024-008990, HDRB 1160, Camino de Cruz Blanca. I'd move that the application be approved on condition that the fence, that the windscreen be of the same color as proposed, but of no greater than 67% opacity, and that the top of the windscreen be no higher than 6 feet high from ground level.
May there seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Biesheuch,
Yes.
Vice Chair Guida,
Friendly amendment, it's 68% is the sample.
Okay. I thought I heard 67, but that's fine. 68 if that's the sample.
And
I
with,
accept the amendment as friendly.
and I'll say yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Benvenu,
Yes.
Member Dignan.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion has passed.
Thank you, Abby. Discussion items, anything?
I have one. Just one quick, thank you, Madam Chair. Circling back to the, I'm sorry.
I said nothing under discussion, but we'll move on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Anything under
Jumped the gun.
discussion items?
Just one item,
Oh,
just to put notice to the board, give notice to the board that I won't be present at the next hearing. That is when the obelisk session will occur. Maggie Moore, the interim assistant director, will be present. I will be in Peru.
thank you. Matters on the board.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I was
Menu.
actually always going to say in response to the earlier comment from the public that my understanding that the Soldiers Monument is set to be heard by this board at the next board meeting. So that the public is aware of that, if they have questions.
What is the framework for that discussion? What are we being asked?
I
to
provide
provide?
recommendations, but it's not considered, my understanding from what I heard at the city governing body meeting was that this is not a quasi judicial proceeding. It's not even within our jurisdiction, but they're referring it to the various city boards to give the public an opportunity to comment in front of those boards and for board members to provide their own comments if they so desire. It's
Comment.
comments to come back for the governing bodies.
Okay.
Assistance in making a final determination.
Interesting. Okay.
That was my understanding, but Heather, please correct me if I've misstated or whoever.
Chair Rios, Member Bienvenu, that you're correct. The intent is to be advisory capacity, according to City Attorney McSherry. So this is for an advisory recommendation to the government.
Anything else? Member Guida?
I'm having minor surgery and will not be available for the next board hearing on the 24th.
Good luck.
And honestly, I prefer it to a discussion about the obelisk.
Did I hear you say you're going to be on Zoom? No. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, our next meeting then is on September the 24th. Wow. And may I hear a motion to adjourn?
Member,
Oh,
I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
yes.
There was an interesting case that I think I should just pass along to you just as a
Oh,
matter of
okay.
interest. The case is Union Protectiva versus City of Santa Fe. And as I understand, I haven't read all the pleadings in that case. I'm not involved in it. But there was a motion by the city to dismiss that case. It has a bearing on the placement of the obelisk, as I understand. But as I said, I haven't read all of the pleadings. There was a motion to dismiss by the city, which was denied by Judge Wilson last week. And so therefore that case will proceed September 12th, that is Thursday, at 8:30. It is the third case on the docket, but it's not unusual for, other cases there to be an announcement that other cases have resolved. This case may or may not go to trial Thursday morning at 8:30, and Judge Wilson's courtroom is open to the public. You can attend in person, but also you can log on to a judge's Zoom meeting, or I think it's Google Meets meeting from the New Mexico court's website. And you look up the judges, and there will be an icon for the judge's docket. You log on to Judge Wilson's docket, and you can watch the proceedings. They are open to the public.
Yeah, and the Union Protectiva wants the obelisk put back up on the plaza. So that's the crux of that case. Oh, that's going to be an interesting case to hear.
Madam Chair, if I
Yeah.
just may prolong this a little bit longer, I just want to report out to the board that Member Mather and I met with Lloyd Associates Architects earlier today about, as a subcommittee of this board, review the proposal for its addition to the cathedral school. And so we had a good and very positive discussion about the types of changes that the board would like to see and could possibly approve. Of course, subject to the full board's review. Lloyd Associates indicated that they would do a redesign. They think they would like to meet with us one more time before coming back to the board.
I think at least once, maybe twice.
Maybe twice.
But I thought it was a lively discussion, and I definitely wanted to listen. So that's good.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for informing us. And I entertain a motion for adjournment. Yes. And do I hear a second?
So moved. Second.
And roll call vote, please.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Bienvenu, Vice Chair Guida,
Yes.
Member Biesheup, Member Degnan.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you are adjourned.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mary Ellen. First meeting.